That day, like any other ordinary day, I was sitting at my usual coffee shop near the office sipping my coffee, when a homeless boy approached me holding out his hand to ask for a few coins. The boy was scrawny, his clothes tattered, with large, round eyes full of wariness. Without much thought, I pulled out my wallet and handed him $10. He gave a slight nod, thanked me in a soft voice, and then, as if by reflex, slipped a crumpled piece of paper into my hand. Before I could ask anything, he vanished into the bustling crowd on the street. When I unfolded the paper, I froze. The shaky scrawled words read, "Don't drink that coffee. It might be poisoned." My heart pounded as if it wanted to leap out of my chest. The steaming cup of coffee was still in my hand, its fragrant aroma rising as always. But from that moment, my life, like a book torn apart, would never be the same again. My name is Timothy Crowley. I'm 38 years old, an ordinary office worker in Newport, Rhode Island. My life before this was nothing remarkable. A small house, a steady job, and a family. My wife, Kimberly, and our 2 children, Lily and Kevin, were my entire world. But 4 months ago, everything collapsed, like a nightmare I could never wake from. I still vividly remember that morning, a chilly autumn day. I had just left the house, kissing Kimberly and the kids goodbye as usual. Lily, my 8-year-old, clung to my leg, whining for me to buy her candy after work. Kevin, my 5-year-old, was busy playing with his favorite toy car, only looking up to flash a wide grin when I ruffled his hair. Kimberly stood at the door, her gentle smile like the morning sunlight, reminding me to bring a jacket because it might rain. "You always forget," she teased with a playful laugh. I waved, got into the car, and drove off, completely unaware that it would be the last time I saw them alive. The accident happened on the highway at noon. A truck lost control and crashed head-on into Kimberly's car as she was driving the kids to their extracurricular classes. The police said they didn't have time to react. All 3 were gone instantly. When I got the call from the hospital, I was in the office reviewing a report. The phone rang and the voice on the other end was cold, delivering the news like it was just a formality. I don't remember how I stood up, left the office, or drove to the hospital. All I recall is arriving and seeing 3 beds covered with white sheets. I collapsed. My screams echoed in that cold room, but nothing could bring them back. In the days that followed, I was like a soulless shell. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, just sat in the living room staring into the void where Lily's laughter, Kevin's babbling, and Kimberly's soft humming while cooking once filled the air. The house was now suffocatingly silent. I started taking sedatives and seeing a therapist, but nothing could ease the pain. It was like a dull knife, slicing into my heart, slow and agonizing. The funeral for Kimberly and the kids is a memory I never want to revisit, but it clings to me like a shadow. My in-laws, Vivian and Leonard Blackwood, showed up in elegant black attire, their faces cold as stone. They had never liked me. From the day Kimberly and I fell in love, they made it clear they thought I was unworthy of their daughter. I was just an ordinary office worker with no power or wealth, while Kimberly was the precious gem of the Blackwood family, a prominent, wealthy family in Newport. They wanted her to marry someone of their class, but Kimberly chose me, despite all their objections. I thought the pain of losing their daughter and grandchildren might soften them, at least in that moment. I was wrong. At the funeral, as I stood before the 3 coffins, tears streaming down my face, Vivian approached me, her voice icy. "If you had been a better husband and father, maybe they wouldn't have died." Her words were like a dagger, piercing straight through my heart. Leonard stood beside her, silent, but his contemptuous glare spoke volumes. People around us whispered. Some tried to comfort me, but Vivian's words shattered me all over again. I couldn't respond, only bowed my head in silence, letting the pain pile upon more pain. After the funeral, I cut off almost all contact with the Blackwoods. I didn't want to see them or hear any more of their insults. I returned to an empty house, trying to keep living, though each day felt like torture. Work was the only thing keeping me occupied, but even that couldn't fill the void in my heart. The house, once filled with Lily's laughter, Kevin's babbling, and Kimberly's gentle singing, was now shrouded in a terrifying silence. Every corner of the room, every object evoked memories that cut into my heart like a knife. I didn't dare open Kimberly's wardrobe, couldn't bear to look at Lily's scribbled drawings or touch the toy car Kevin used to push back and forth across the floor. It was all too painful. Every morning I clung to my routine, driving to the small coffee shop near the office, sipping a cup of coffee before work. The place wasn't anything special. A few worn wooden tables, the rich aroma of freshly roasted coffee, and a young barista who always greeted me with a friendly smile. I sat in my usual spot by the window, watching people pass by on the street, trying to find a sliver of peace amidst the storm in my heart. But peace, it turned out, was nothing more than an illusion. Strange symptoms began to emerge, like drops of water signaling an approaching storm. First came the stomach pains. At first they were fleeting, like discomfort from eating something disagreeable. I thought it was just because I hadn't been eating properly. But gradually the pain grew more intense, as if someone were twisting my stomach tightly. Once during a meeting at work, I had to excuse myself and rush to the bathroom, sweating profusely, my hands trembling. I told myself it was just stress, that my therapist had warned me about physical symptoms caused by depression. Then came the insomnia. I had already struggled to sleep since the accident, but now sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with images of Kimberly and the kids. Some nights my heart pounded erratically, as if it might burst out of my chest. I took more sedatives, but they seemed to have lost their effect. Instead, I began to feel an overwhelming exhaustion, a deep-seated fatigue, as if my body's life force was being drained. My head throbbed with headaches that lasted for hours, making it impossible to focus on anything. I went to the doctor, but the results showed nothing abnormal. Psychological stress, he said, prescribing a new medication and advising me to rest. I nodded, but deep down a sense of unease began to creep in. Something wasn't right. I knew it. But I didn't dare dig deeper, didn't dare confront the possibility that something worse might be happening. I just wanted to believe it was all due to grief, that my body was reacting to what my mind couldn't bear. About 3 months after the funeral, I received paperwork from the insurance company, a staggering sum, $5 million, from the life insurance policies for Kimberly and the kids. When the insurance representative called to inform me, his voice was calm, as if discussing a routine transaction. I sat in the living room, staring at the family photo on the wall, feeling suffocated. That amount of money, unimaginable to me, brought no joy. It was merely a cruel reminder that the people I loved most were gone forever. I locked the documents in the safe, unwilling to think about the money. To me, it was like poison, something I didn't want to touch. I told myself I'd save it, perhaps use it for charity, as Kimberly would have wanted. She had once talked about building a small library for kids in a poor neighborhood, a place where they could read and learn. The thought brought a fleeting smile to my face. But that smile vanished when I received a call from Vivian, my mother-in-law. Vivian called one evening, her voice so sweet it sent a chill down my spine. "Timothy, how are you? I've been so worried about you," she said, as if she hadn't humiliated me at the funeral. I responded curtly, trying to keep my tone calm, but inside I felt something was off. Then she brought up the insurance money subtly, as if mentioning it in passing. "I heard you received a large insurance payout. What are you planning to do with it? You know, family should help each other. You could invest in our company. What do you think?" I was stunned, unsure how to respond. I said I hadn't thought about it, that I needed time. But her voice, though still sweet, carried a hint of urgency, as if she were holding back excitement. Leonard, my father-in-law, called a few days later, his tone deeper and more authoritative. "Timothy, you need to have a clear plan for that money. It belongs to the whole family, you know." I felt a surge of anger. The whole family? They had never considered me family. But I stayed silent, promising only to think it over. After the call, I sat down, hands trembling, trying to piece things together. Their shift from disdain to this sudden interest made me suspicious. But I still couldn't bring myself to believe they were capable of anything worse than their insults. My symptoms grew worse. The stomach pains were no longer just cramps. They felt like someone was drilling into my gut. Once I had to leave work early, driving home in agony. The fatigue made it nearly impossible to get up in the mornings. My headaches were relentless, and at times I felt dizzy, as if the world were tilting around me. I began to feel afraid, but kept convincing myself it was all psychological. I didn't want to face the possibility that something more serious was happening. But deep inside, a small voice whispered that I was overlooking something, a silent, invisible danger slowly closing in around me. Every morning I still went to the familiar coffee shop, as if it were an unbreakable habit. The strong black coffee was the only thing keeping me going, though it no longer brought the comfort it once did. The barista Amanda still greeted me with her friendly smile, but I began to notice small details I had previously overlooked. The way she glanced at me when handing over the coffee, or how some of the other staff members would whisper to each other, falling silent when I walked in. I told myself I was being paranoid, that the grief of my loss had made me suspicious of the entire world. But then that day, everything changed. I was sitting in my usual spot by the window, the steaming cup of coffee in front of me. Outside, Newport was wrapped in the crisp chill of autumn, with golden leaves drifting onto the sidewalk. I watched the flow of people passing by, trying to focus on a work report on my laptop, but my mind was blank. The constant stomach pains and headaches made it impossible to think clearly. I took a sip of coffee, the familiar bitterness sliding down my throat, but today it left a strange aftertaste, something that didn't belong in that cup. That's when the boy appeared. The bell on the door jingled, and I looked up to see a scrawny boy in tattered clothes step inside. His worn-out shoes dragged across the wooden floor, making soft, scuffing sounds. His messy hair covered half his face, but his large, round eyes were filled with wariness, like a small animal seeking shelter. He walked straight toward me, his small hands outstretched, his voice trembling. "Sir, can you spare some money for food?" His voice was so soft I had to lean forward to hear him. Something in his eyes stopped me in my tracks, not just hunger, but a deep-seated fear, as if he were carrying a secret he couldn't voice. I pulled out my wallet, handed him a $10 bill, and he whispered, "Thank you, sir." But instead of turning away, he suddenly slipped a crumpled piece of paper into my hand. His movement was so quick I barely had time to react, and before I could ask anything, he darted out of the shop, disappearing into the crowd on the street. I stared at the paper in my hand, my heart pounding. When I unfolded it, the shaky scrawled words made my blood run cold. "Don't drink that coffee. It might be poisoned." I looked up, scanning the street through the window for the boy, but he was gone. The coffee in front of me suddenly felt like a foreign, threatening object. I stared at it, the steam still rising, the familiar aroma now carrying a deadly warning. I pushed the cup away, my hands trembling, my mind racing. Was this a prank? Some homeless kid trying to get attention? But the look in his eyes, the fear in his voice made it impossible to dismiss his warning. Then I caught a glimpse of a figure standing at the corner of the street a few meters from the shop, holding a phone as if taking pictures of me. When I looked closer, he pulled up his hood and quickly turned away, vanishing into the crowd. I didn't take another sip of the coffee. I stood up, trying to stay calm, but a storm was brewing inside me. I slipped the note into my coat pocket and left the shop, my eyes scanning the street for the boy. But he had vanished, leaving no trace. I stood on the sidewalk, the bustling crowd moving around me, yet I felt more alone than ever. The boy's vague warning had awakened a fear I had tried to bury. The symptoms, stomach pains, insomnia, exhaustion, were no longer just psychological. They were signs of something far more sinister. That afternoon, driving home, I couldn't stop thinking about the note. The coffee might be poisoned. The thought cut through me like a knife. I had been drinking coffee at that shop every day for weeks, for months. If it was truly poisoned, it had been seeping into my body for a long time. My stomach churned, whether from fear or the invisible poison itself. I couldn't tell. I pulled over to the side of the road, taking deep breaths to calm myself. But then images of Vivian and Leonard flashed in my mind. Their strange phone calls, their feigned concern, their obsession with the insurance money. Could they be involved? No, I shook my head, trying to dismiss the thought. They were Kimberly's parents. No matter how much they despised me, they couldn't be that cruel. Or could they? When I got home, I locked the door, drew the curtains, and sat on the couch, the note still clutched in my hand. I read it again, each word searing into my mind. Don't drink that coffee. It might be poisoned. I thought about my symptoms, the excruciating stomach pains, the debilitating fatigue, the relentless headaches. I had seen a doctor, but he had only chalked it up to stress. What if the boy was right? What if someone was trying to poison me? I felt suffocated, as if the air in the room was being drained. I opened the safe and pulled out the insurance documents. $5 million, a sum large enough to change anyone's life. I had never considered using the money for myself, but to the Blackwoods, it seemed to be the only thing that mattered. I recalled Vivian's voice, sweet but cold, and Leonard's contemptuous glare at the funeral. They had never seen me as family. To them, I was just a lowly obstacle, someone in their way. And now, with Kimberly and the kids gone, I was the only thing standing between them and the insurance money. The thought that they might be connected to the boy's warning sent a shiver down my spine, but I couldn't dismiss it. I decided I had to find the boy. He was the key to understanding what was happening. But how do you find a homeless kid in a city as big as Newport? All I knew was that he appeared near the coffee shop, and I had no other leads. I grabbed my phone and texted my father, Gary Crowley, the only person I trusted at that moment. My father was a retired military special agent, a tough but reserved man who always had a way of handling complex situations. After retiring, he lived alone in the suburbs, but we stayed in regular contact. I briefly told him about the note and the boy's warning, without mentioning my suspicions about the Blackwoods. I only said I needed his help to look into something discreetly. "What are you suspicious of, Timothy?" My father's voice was calm and steady over the phone. I hesitated, unsure how to explain. "I'm not sure, but something's wrong. I need you to help me investigate." Quietly. He didn't ask further questions, only said, "Send me everything you have, and be careful." I knew he was worried, but he wasn't the type to show emotion. For him, actions spoke louder than words. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, my mind racing with unanswered questions. The boy's note sat on the nightstand, a constant reminder that I was no longer safe. I thought of Kimberly, her smile, and wondered if she would forgive me for suspecting her parents. But then I recalled their insults at the funeral. Their sudden shift in demeanor and the growing sense that I was being hunted became undeniable. The boy's warning, "Don't drink that coffee. It might be poisoned," cut through my mind like a razor-sharp knife. I could no longer pretend everything was just a coincidence. I had to act, had to uncover the truth before it was too late. The next morning, I woke up with dark circles under my eyes and a body racked with exhaustion. The lingering stomach pains were a constant reminder that something was silently destroying me from within. I stared at the note on the table, the boy's scrawled words screaming in my head. I couldn't sit idly by any longer. If someone was truly poisoning me, the coffee I drank every day at the familiar shop was the clearest clue. I decided to return there, not to drink, but to collect a sample of the coffee and find answers. Before leaving the house, I rummaged through my desk drawer, searching for something to hold the coffee sample without raising suspicion. I found an old ballpoint pen, the cheap kind I used for taking notes. I disassembled it, washed the empty pen casing with hot water, and carefully dried it. It was small, easy to conceal, and no one would notice if I poured a bit of coffee into it. I slipped the pen into my coat pocket along with the boy's note, like a talisman. I knew I was stepping into a dangerous game, but I had no other choice. On the way to the coffee shop, I called my father, Gary Crowley. I told him about the note, the boy's warning, and the strange symptoms plaguing my body. I tried to keep my voice steady, but he could hear the anxiety in every word. "I need you to help me check something," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm going to take a sample of the coffee from the shop. Do you have a way to test it?" Discreetly. My father was silent for a moment, as if weighing his response. Then he replied, his voice low and steady. "Bring the sample to me. I know someone who can help. But Timothy, you need to be careful. If what the boy said is true, you're dealing with someone who will stop at nothing." I nodded, though he couldn't see me, and felt a small comfort knowing my father had my back. When I walked into the coffee shop, I tried to act normal as I did every day. Amanda, the barista, flashed her usual smile when she saw me. "Same as always, Timothy?" she asked, already starting to prepare my strong black coffee. I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside I felt like I was walking on a tightrope. I watched her closely, every move as she ground the coffee, poured hot water, and placed the cup in front of me. Everything seemed normal, but the boy's warning made it impossible to trust anyone. I sat down in my usual corner by the window, the steaming coffee in front of me. I glanced around, making sure no one was watching, then pulled the pen from my pocket. Carefully, I poured a small amount of coffee from the cup into the pen casing, just enough for testing. I screwed the cap back on, slipped it into my pocket, and stood to leave, leaving the coffee nearly untouched. Amanda gave me a slightly surprised look, but I waved, saying I had an urgent matter to attend to. Driving to my father's house, my heart pounded. The pen in my pocket felt heavy, carrying both my hope and my fear. I didn't know what I was expecting. Part of me hoped this was all a misunderstanding, that the boy was mistaken, that my symptoms were just stress. But another part, a colder, deeper part, whispered that I was about to face a horrifying truth. My father greeted me at the door, his sharp eyes scanning my face. "You look terrible," he said bluntly. I gave a weak smile and handed him the pen. "This is the coffee sample. Can you have it tested? I need to know for sure." He took the pen, examining it as if it were a piece of evidence in a major case. "I'll get in touch with an old friend at a lab. They work discreetly, no traces, but Timothy, if there's something in this, you need to prepare yourself." I nodded, but inside I wasn't sure I was ready for anything. For the 3 days it took to get the results, I barely left the house. I stopped drinking coffee, sticking to water and food. I prepared myself. The stomach pains still came, but they seemed less intense, as if my body was trying to purge something. I didn't dare call my father to ask about the results, afraid I wouldn't be able to handle the truth. But every night I lay in bed staring at the boy's note, thinking of Kimberly, Lily, and Kevin. I wondered if the insurance money, $5 million, was the root of all this. And if so, who was behind it? Vivian and Leonard Blackwood, Kimberly's parents, were the only names that came to mind. But I still didn't want to believe they could be that cruel. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, my father called me to his house. When I walked in, he was sitting at the dining table, a piece of paper in front of him. His face was grim, but his eyes burned with a rare anger. "Sit down, Timothy," he said, his voice so low it sent a chill through me. I sat, feeling the air in the room grow heavier. "Here are the test results," he said, sliding the paper toward me. "Your coffee contains thallium, a colorless, odorless, tasteless poison. The dose is small, but enough to weaken you over time, and if continued, it would lead to death." My blood felt like it froze. The word thallium echoed in my head like a death knell. I looked at my father, searching for a glimmer of hope that this was a mistake, but his eyes told me there was no room for doubt. "Someone is trying to kill you, Timothy," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "They didn't want you to die right away. They wanted you to waste away, to make it look like a natural death. This was carefully planned." I gripped the paper, my hands trembling. The symptoms, stomach pains, exhaustion, headaches, now had an explanation. Someone, somewhere, had been slipping thallium into my coffee day after day. I thought of the coffee shop, Amanda, the other staff, and the shadowy figure I saw at the street corner. But above all, I thought of Vivian and Leonard, their feigned concern, their persistent calls about the insurance money, their contemptuous glares at the funeral. It was all starting to form a horrifying picture. "What do I do now, Dad?" I asked, my voice breaking. My father stood, placing a hand on my shoulder, a rare gesture he reserved for truly serious moments. "We'll find out who's behind this," he said. "But from now on, you don't eat or drink anything you haven't prepared yourself. And you need to keep this quiet. If they know you figured it out, they'll change their plan and we'll lose the trail." I nodded, but inside I felt like I was sinking into an abyss. I thought of the homeless boy who had saved me with his warning. I didn't know who he was, but I owed him my life. And I knew I had to find him, not just to thank him, but to understand what he knew. More than that, I had to face the truth that the people trying to kill me might be the ones closest to my family, the ones Kimberly had once loved. As I left my father's house, clutching the test results, I felt like I was carrying a ticking time bomb. I was no longer Timothy Crowley, the ordinary office worker. I was a man being hunted, and I had to fight to survive. The next morning, I returned to the area near the coffee shop where I had first met the boy. I didn't go inside, afraid I might be watched. Instead, I parked my car a few meters away on a side street and observed from a distance. The crowd bustled by, but there was no sign of the boy. I waited for hours, my eyes scanning every face, every small figure in the crowd. Each time I saw a child in tattered clothes, my heart raced, only to sink with disappointment when I realized it wasn't him. Near noon, just as I was about to give up, I saw him. The boy was standing at a street corner near a trash bin, rummaging through discarded items. His messy hair covered half his face, but those large, wary eyes were unmistakable. I stepped out of the car, trying to approach him without drawing attention. But when I was just a few steps away, he looked up, his eyes filled with panic, and he started to run. "Wait!" I called, loud enough for him to hear. "I'm the man from the other day. I just want to talk." The boy stopped but kept his distance, his eyes cautious. "I don't want trouble," he whispered, his voice trembling. I raised my hands, signaling I meant no harm. "I know, and I'm grateful for the note. You saved me. But I need to know more. What did you hear? How did you know the coffee was poisoned?" He glanced around as if afraid someone was watching. Then he stepped closer, lowering his voice. "My name's Mark. I hang around the coffee shop a lot, begging for food. One day I was sitting near the back door in the alley. I overheard a man talking to one of the workers inside. They were talking about putting something in the coffee of a man who comes every day. They described him. He sounded like you. I don't know who they were, but I got scared. I thought you should know." My blood ran cold. "Sounded like me, how?" I asked, my voice faltering. Mark hesitated, then said, "They said it was a man around 40, brown hair, wearing a suit, always sitting by the window. I saw you and thought it matched, so I wrote the note." I clenched my fists, trying to suppress the anger surging inside me. Someone had targeted me, knew my habits, knew where I sat, what I drank. This wasn't random. It was a meticulously calculated plan. I thanked Mark, giving him some money and a sandwich I'd bought on the way. "I'll find you again, okay? If you hear anything else, let me know." Mark nodded, his eyes still wary but showing a hint of trust. Before he turned to leave, I asked, "Where do you live, Mark?" He shook his head, saying softly, "I don't have a home. But I'm okay." His words twisted my heart. I thought of Lily and Kevin, how they were always surrounded by love. Mark, a homeless kid, had risked himself to save me. I promised myself that if I got through this, I'd do something for him. As Mark walked away, I stood there amidst the bustling crowd, feeling like the world was closing in around me. I knew I had to act quickly but carefully. I called my father and told him what Mark had said. "I need your help," I said. "We have to watch the coffee shop. Find out who the worker Mark mentioned is. My father agreed immediately. Take me to the shop. We'll observe from a distance. If someone in there is involved, we'll find them. The next day, my father and I parked across the street from the coffee shop in a rented car to avoid being recognized. My father brought a small pair of binoculars, a relic from his days as a special agent. Point out the people who are usually in the shop, he said, his voice calm but sharp. I pointed out Amanda, the barista, and a few others I often saw. But then I noticed a young guy with messy hair who often stood at the secondary counter. Him, I said. He's always there but doesn't interact much. I don't know his name. My father observed the guy through the binoculars, jotting something in a small notebook. He looks nervous, he said. Notice how he glances at the door every time a customer walks in. Something's off. We kept watching, and by the end of the day, we saw something unusual. A man in a black coat, a baseball cap pulled low over his face, entered the alley behind the shop. The messy-haired worker appeared, took an envelope from the man, and quickly returned inside. My father snapped a few photos from a distance, but the dim light made it hard to see the man's face clearly. We've got a lead, my father said, but it's not enough. We need to get that worker to talk. I nodded, but a chill ran through me. This was no longer just suspicion. Someone was paying to poison me, and that worker was part of the plan. My father and I circled to the back door of the shop. When the messy-haired worker, whose name tag read Jake, stepped into the alley to take out the trash, my father approached him, his voice low and commanding. Jake, we need to talk, he said, his piercing gaze making the guy flinch. I know what you're doing with the coffee, and I know who's paying you. Jake's face went pale and he tried to deny it. I don't know what you're talking about. But my father didn't let him off. He stepped closer, his voice low but menacing. You have two choices. One, tell me who's paying you. Two, I hand you over to the police and they'll get everything out of you. Choose. Jake trembled, his eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. But my father blocked his path and I stood behind, my heart pounding. Finally, Jake broke. I don't know his name, he whispered. A man, about 50, paid me $2,000 each time to put something in a guy's coffee. He said it was just something to make him tired, not dangerous. I swear I didn't know it was poison. My blood boiled. My father signaled for Jake to stay quiet. Keep working like nothing's happened. Got it? He said. If you tip anyone off, you'll regret it. Jake nodded frantically, clearly terrified. As we left the alley, my father pulled me aside. We've got this worker, but he's just a pawn. The mastermind is the man handing over the envelope. And Timothy, I suspect the Blackwoods are involved. Their behavior, the insurance money, it all adds up. I nodded, but deep down I still didn't want to believe it. Vivian and Leonard, Kimberly's parents, were the only ones with a clear motive. But then my father said something that sent a shiver down my spine. A few days ago, I did some preliminary digging on the Blackwoods through some old contacts. They're under investigation for ties to a shady organization that helps people seize assets through sophisticated poisonings and assassinations. They take a cut of the profits after each job. Timothy, you might be their next target. I stood there in the cold alley, feeling like the world was collapsing around me. The Blackwoods, the people I once called family, might be behind the plan to kill me. And now I had to find a way to expose them before they devised another scheme to take my life and claim the insurance money. Driving home, I tried to piece together the fragments in my mind. Everything was becoming terrifyingly clear. Vivian and Leonard's contempt from the moment I fell in love with Kimberly, their insults at the funeral, and their sudden shift in demeanor when they learned about the $5 million insurance payout. They didn't care about the death of their daughter or grandchildren. They were fixated on the money. And now, with thallium in my coffee and Jake, the barista's confession, I could no longer pretend they were innocent. But to expose them, I needed evidence, something that would not only reveal their true faces, but also bring them to justice. The next day, I called my father. I need stronger evidence. I can't just point fingers and accuse them. If they're really part of an organization like you said, they won't leave easy openings. My father was silent for a moment, as if weighing his thoughts. Then he spoke, his voice resolute. You're right. The test results and the barista's vague confession aren't enough to pin them down. You need ironclad proof. I have an idea to make your in-laws expose themselves. They think you're weakening, that the poison is taking you down. Use that. Pretend you're gravely ill, as if their plan is succeeding. They'll let their guard down, and that's when we'll catch them. My father's idea was like a light in the darkness. If Vivian and Leonard believed I was dying, they would reveal their true nature. I thought of Kimberly, how she always believed in her parents' goodness despite their poor treatment of me. I wondered if she would forgive me for suspecting them, but then I recalled Vivian's contemptuous glare at the funeral and her falsely sweet voice in recent calls. No, I couldn't let emotions override reason. I had to do this for myself, for Lily and Kevin, and for Kimberly. I'll fake being sick, I told my father. I'll make them think I'm dying. But I need your help to prepare. If they come to the house, I want to record everything they say, every move they make. My father nodded over the phone. I know how to do it. You'll need hidden cameras and a recorder. I'll bring the equipment. But Timothy, you have to play the part well. If they suspect anything, it'll all fall apart. The next day, my father arrived at my house with a small black bag. Inside were 2 tiny cameras no larger than a coin and a recorder capable of picking up sound from a distance. He showed me how to set them up, one camera hidden in a crevice of the bookshelf facing the sofa where I usually received guests, the other in a table lamp in the corner aimed at the front door. The recorder was tucked under the table where it could capture every sound in the room without being detected. My father tested each device, ensuring they worked perfectly. They'll record everything, he said, but be careful. Don't let them touch anything. After he left, I began practicing. I stopped going out, didn't go to work or the coffee shop. I called my boss saying I was seriously ill and needed time to recover. I kept the curtains drawn, letting the house sink into dim light, as if I no longer had the strength to face the outside world. I lay on the sofa in old pajamas, my hair disheveled, deliberately making my face look gaunt. Whenever I stood, I moved slowly as if the poison were eating away at my body. But inside, I was more alert than ever. I was setting a trap, and Vivian and Leonard were the prey. 2 days later, as I expected, Vivian called. Her voice was so sweet it sent a chill down my spine. Timothy, are you okay? I heard you're sick. I'm so worried. I faked a cough, my voice weak. Mom, I'm not doing well. I'm tired, aching all over, can't go to work. I just need to rest for a while. I dragged out each word as if speaking took effort. Vivian paused, then said, her voice dripping with false concern, Oh, you poor thing. Dad and I will come visit you, okay? We're family. You need someone by your side. I could sense the glee hidden in her tone. They thought their plan was working, that I was wasting away from the poison they'd slipped into my coffee. I agreed, my voice trembling. Thank you, Mom. I'll be at home. I can't go anywhere. When I hung up, I gripped the phone tightly, my heart pounding. They had taken the bait, but a pang of pain shot through me. Kimberly had loved her parents, and now I was about to expose their true faces. I hoped that, wherever she was, she would understand I had no other choice. The next day, I prepared meticulously for the act. I lay on the sofa, a thin blanket draped over me, my face pale with a bit of makeup I found among Kimberly's things. I scattered empty pill bottles on the table, as if I were surviving on painkillers. The house was a mess with water glasses strewn about, creating the impression I lacked the energy to clean. But everything was calculated. The cameras and recorder were ready, and I texted my father to let him know Vivian and Leonard were coming. I'll be nearby, he replied. If anything goes wrong, call. I'll bring the police immediately. When the doorbell rang, I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I shuffled to the door, pretending to be weak, leaning against the frame as if I could barely stand. Vivian and Leonard stood there, dressed impeccably as always. Vivian gave a pitying smile, but her eyes glinted with a satisfaction I couldn't ignore. Leonard, as usual, was cold and reserved, offering only a nod as I invited them in. "Oh, Timothy, you look awful," Vivian said, her voice thick with feigned concern. She placed a hand on my shoulder, but it felt like the touch of a snake. "You need to rest more. I'll make you a hot cup of tea, okay?" I nodded weakly, letting her guide me back to the sofa. Leonard sat in the chair across from me, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for something. I knew they were assessing me, checking how far I'd deteriorated. Vivian went to the kitchen and I heard her rummaging through the cabinets. I knew she wasn't just looking for tea. The camera in the living room was recording everything, and the recorder under the table was capturing every sound. I faked a cough, letting out a soft groan, but my eyes never left them. Leonard spoke, his voice low and calculated. "Timothy, have you thought about the insurance money yet? You know, that money shouldn't go to waste. We could help you manage it." I closed my eyes, pretending to be exhausted, but my heart was racing. I haven't thought about it," I whispered. "I just want to get better first." Leonard nodded, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch upward, as if pleased with my condition. Vivian returned with a cup of tea, placing it on the table in front of me. "Drink this, dear," she said, her voice so sweet it gave me goosebumps. "It'll make you feel better." I looked at the tea, certain it wasn't safe, but I nodded, picked up the cup, pretended to take a small sip and set it back down, saying I was too tired to drink. Vivian exchanged a glance with Leonard, a fleeting but meaningful look. They thought I hadn't noticed, but I saw it all. They were gloating, believing their plan was nearing completion. But they didn't know I was ready to turn the tables. My small living room had become a stage, and I was the lead actor in a play I had scripted myself. The hidden cameras on the bookshelf and table lamp, the recorder under the table, all were active, capturing every moment, every word spoken by Vivian and Leonard. All I needed to do was stay calm, bide my time, and make them reveal their true selves. Vivian sat on the sofa a short distance from me, her eyes scanning me as if assessing a wounded prey. "Timothy, you really don't look well," she said, her voice so sweet it gave me goosebumps. "You need a doctor. Should I call someone to take care of you?" I coughed weakly, tilting my head as if I barely had the strength to hold it up. "No need, Mom," I whispered. I just need rest." Leonard, seated across from me, nodded, but his eyes never left me. I could feel the coldness in them, as if he were waiting for the moment I'd collapse completely. I knew the moment had come. I needed to make them overconfident, to make them think I was defenseless. I took a deep breath, then suddenly clutched my stomach, groaning in pain. "Oh, God," I moaned, my voice faltering, my body slumping onto the sofa. I closed my eyes, pretending to gasp for air, my hands gripping my stomach as if enduring excruciating pain. Vivian jumped up, her voice panicked. "Timothy! What's wrong? Do we need to call a doctor?" But I caught something in her tone. Not worry, but a subtle satisfaction. I didn't respond, only continued groaning, then collapsed onto the floor, pretending to faint. My head tilted to one side, eyes shut tight, body motionless. I heard Vivian's footsteps approach, then her whispered words to Leonard. "He's almost done for, Leonard." Faster than we expected. Her voice was low but clear, brimming with confidence. "We need to find the insurance documents. They've got to be here somewhere." My heart pounded, but I stayed still, slowing my breathing to mimic unconsciousness. I heard them moving around the room, the sound of pill bottles being shifted on the table, drawers being opened, papers being flipped through. Vivian and Leonard were no longer bothering to hide their urgency. "Where does he keep it?" Leonard muttered, his voice tinged with frustration. "I told you, Vivian, we should have acted faster. If he dies before signing the authorization, it'll take forever to claim that money legally." Vivian replied, her voice cold. "Don't worry, he's not dead yet. But he's had enough to ensure he won't last the week. Just find the documents, and when he wakes up, we'll make him sign. Everything's still on track." I lay there motionless, but inside, a fire of rage burned. They were talking about my death as if it were a business deal, a calculated plan. They didn't just want to kill me. They wanted to seize the insurance money meant for Kimberly, Lily, and Kevin, the family they once claimed to love. I wanted to leap up and scream in their faces, but I knew I had to be patient. Everything was being recorded, and this was the evidence I needed. Vivian continued rummaging, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. "He's weakening so fast," she said, her voice laced with glee. "I told you this plan was perfect. No one suspects a death from exhaustion." Leonard let out a cold chuckle, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. Thallium was the right choice. No trace, no suspicion. Once he's gone, we'll have the 5 million. I knew the time had come. While they were distracted searching, I quietly slipped my phone from my pocket and sent a short text to my father. "Come now." I slid the phone back, continuing to feign unconsciousness, my heart pounding like it might burst. I heard Vivian open the safe in the bedroom, where I deliberately left a copy of the insurance documents. "Found it!" she exclaimed, her voice brimming with excitement. "Leonard, it's here. He was foolish enough to leave it so easy to find." They returned to the living room, and I heard the rustle of papers being opened. "We need him to sign the authorization before he dies," Leonard said. "Otherwise, it'll take time to claim the money from the insurance company." Vivian scoffed. "Don't worry. If he doesn't sign, we'll find a way. The organization has people who can forge signatures, but it's better if he does it himself." I lay there, struggling to stay calm. The cameras and recorder had captured everything, from their confessions to their plans to keep poisoning me. All I needed now was for my father and the police to arrive in time to turn the tables. Moments later, I heard the wail of police sirens in the distance, growing louder and sharper, piercing the quiet neighborhood air. Vivian froze, her voice tense. "Why are the police here? Who called them?" Then the door burst open. Leonard exclaimed, shocked. "Gary, what are you doing here?" My father stepped in calmly. Before Vivian could react, I heard heavy footsteps and the sound of police rushing into the house. I opened my eyes, sat up from the floor, my body no longer pretending to be frail. I stepped forward, facing Vivian and Leonard, my gaze icy. Vivian was stunned, trembling. Leonard stood frozen, his face pale, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. "Timothy, you weren't unconscious?" Vivian stammered, her voice faltering. I smiled, but it was a smile filled with fury. "I was never unconscious, Vivian. I knew everything. About the thallium, about your plan, and about the organization behind you." I walked to the bookshelf, retrieved the hidden camera, then pulled the recorder from under the table. "Everything you said, every move you made has been recorded," I said, my voice calm but sharp. I played the recorder, and Vivian's voice filled the room. "Thallium will do its job. He's had enough to ensure he won't last the week." Leonard tried to back away, but the police blocked his path. Vivian panicked. "You dared to set us up?" "Who do you think you are?" "I'm Kimberly's husband," I replied, my voice trembling with emotion. "I'm Lily and Kevin's father. And I won't let you steal the last thing they left me." I pointed to the tea on the table. "That tea, I'm sure it has thallium. Officers, please have it tested." One of the officers nodded, carefully placing the tea in an evidence bag. Vivian and Leonard were escorted to the police car, their eyes filled with panic and rage. "You'll regret this, Timothy," Leonard roared, but I just looked at him, unshaken. "The only ones who will regret anything are you," I said, "for betraying Kimberly, betraying the kids, and betraying my trust." The police led them away, and I stood there, watching, feeling as if a weight had been lifted. My father placed a hand on my shoulder, his eyes filled with pride but tinged with worry. "You did well, Timothy," he said. "But this isn't over. Their organization is still out there." I nodded, knowing the fight was just beginning, but for now I had reclaimed justice for Kimberly, Lily, and Kevin, and I swore I wouldn't stop until everyone behind this paid the price. The sound of police sirens still echoed faintly in the neighborhood as Vivian and Leonard were taken away, their eyes burning with panic and fury. I stood in the house that was once my family's haven, feeling as if I had just emerged from a nightmare. But I knew the journey for justice was still far from over. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of investigations and preparations. The police tested the cup of tea Vivian had prepared, and the results were unsurprising. Thallium, in a dose lethal enough to kill a healthy person within days. Combined with the audio recordings and footage from the hidden cameras, the evidence against Vivian and Leonard was undeniable. They were detained immediately, awaiting their trial. But what unsettled me most was the organization behind them. A shadowy network specializing in sophisticated poisonings and asset seizures. My father, with his experience as a former special agent, reached out to old contacts in federal investigations, providing information about this organization. I knew dismantling it wouldn't be easy, but we had a starting point. The trial took place on a cold morning in Newport. I stepped into the courtroom, my heart pounding. Not from fear, but from the realization that I could finally confront those who had betrayed Kimberly and the kids. Vivian and Leonard sat in the defendant's dock, stripped of their usual arrogance. Vivian, with her meticulously styled silver hair, now looked haggard, her eyes avoiding mine. Leonard, always cold and calculating, kept his head bowed as if trying to hide his shame. But I felt no pity. They had chosen this path, and now they would pay the price. The prosecutor presented the evidence with clarity and precision. The audio recording was played in the courtroom, Vivian's voice ringing out cold and ruthless. Thallium will do its job. He's had enough to ensure he won't last the week. Leonard's whispered plans to seize the insurance money silenced the room. The videos from the hidden cameras, capturing them rummaging through my house for the insurance documents, left the jury stunned. I sat in the front row, my hands clenched, struggling to contain my anger as I recalled their words about Kimberly and the kids, as if they were mere pawns in their scheme. Vivian and Leonard's lawyer tried to argue that they acted under pressure from the organization, that they didn't directly poison me. But the prosecutor countered, pointing out that they had orchestrated the plan, hired someone to carry it out, and stood to profit from the insurance money. The test results from the tea were the final blow, irrefutable proof of their intent to kill. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury delivered their verdict. Vivian and Leonard were sentenced to life in prison for conspiracy to commit murder and association with a criminal organization. But what brought me relief was the information the police extracted from Vivian. Under pressure, she revealed details about the organization, a shadowy network that provided poisons and facilitated assassinations to seize assets. Based on her testimony, federal investigators launched a large-scale operation. Though the organization wasn't entirely dismantled, several key members were arrested, significantly weakening their network. My father, with a rare smile, said to me, "We've dealt them a heavy blow, Timothy. But stay vigilant. People like that don't give up easily." I nodded, knowing he was right. After the trial, I returned to my house, but it was no longer a place filled with pain. I cleaned every corner, arranging photos of Kimberly, Lily, and Kevin on the shelf. I was no longer afraid to look at them. Kimberly's smile, Lily's mischievous eyes, and Kevin's warm hugs were now a source of strength, not just pain. I decided to use part of the insurance money to fulfill Kimberly's dream, building a small library for children in a poor neighborhood where kids could read, learn, and find hope. I named it the Kimberly Library, and on its opening day, seeing children cheering around the bookshelves, I felt as if Kimberly were smiling at me from somewhere above. But what truly gave my life new meaning was Mark, the homeless boy who saved me. After the trial, I returned to the area near the coffee shop to find him. I spotted him huddled in an alley, his large, wary eyes now holding a glimmer of hope when he saw me. "Mr. Timothy?" he asked, his voice surprised. I sat beside him, told him everything that had happened, and thanked him for risking himself to warn me. "I had nothing to lose," he said, but his smile tugged at my heart. "I offered to adopt Mark. At first, he refused, saying he didn't want to burden anyone. But I was patient, bringing him to my home, giving him a room, and slowly he began to open up. I completed the legal process to become his guardian, and for the first time in months, I felt I had a family again. Mark didn't replace Lily or Kevin, but he brought a new light, a reason for me to keep living. I returned to work, but now with a clearer purpose. I was no longer just an office worker going through the motions. I got involved in charity work, helping homeless children like Mark, and worked with my father to provide information to the police about the criminal organization. My life was no longer empty. It still bore the scars of pain, but I had learned to live with them and turn them into motivation. Looking back, I realized that life can be cruel, but it also teaches us how to rise from the ashes. I lost Kimberly, Lily, and Kevin, the people I loved most, in an accident I couldn't prevent. I was betrayed by those I once called family and nearly lost my life to their greed. But I also learned that even in the darkest moments there are small rays of light. Mark, the homeless boy, was that light. My father, with his resilience and wisdom, was my guide, and I, with my unwavering determination, found meaning in life again. The greatest lesson I learned is this: never stop believing in yourself even when the world turns its back on you. When faced with danger, trust your instincts. If I had ignored Mark's warning, if I hadn't trusted my gut, I might not be here to tell this story. And my advice to anyone reading these words: cherish those you love, for they can be taken from you at any moment. Be wary of those around you, for not everyone has good intentions. And most importantly, fight for the truth, no matter how painful it is. I don't know what the future holds. The criminal organization is still out there, and one day they might come for me. But I'm no longer afraid. I have Mark, my father, and the memories of Kimberly, Lily, and Kevin to give me strength. I've walked through the darkness, and I'll keep moving forward, carrying the light they left in my heart. 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 My heart.